Welcome to the Navseam podcast, where classical gourmands everywhere can finally get their fill. Join us for a delectable discussion of Greco-Roman civilization stretching from the Minoans and Mycenaeans through the Renaissance and right down to the present. And now, ladies and gentlemen, here are your hosts, Dr. David Noe and Dr. Jeff Winkle.
Welcome, Ad Nauseam listeners, to episode 114 of our little classically themed gustatory podcast. As always, my name is Dr. David C. Noe. The C stands for crotchety. And I'm here in the Vomitorium South, deep down in the bunker, with my good friend and fabulous co-host, Dr. Jeffrey T. Winkle. How you doing, Jeff?
I'm feeling great. I'm trying to think of what the T stands for. Maybe trepidatious.
Trepidatious?
Yeah.
Well, I've used previously tremendous. The T is for tremendous.
I appreciate that. Yeah.
And you're doing well?
I am doing well.
How's the week of spring break?
I'm on spring break.
Okay.
And it's not exactly spring. But
well, in Michigan, spring break is, 10 feet of ice, something like
right.
that.
So, no, I've been enjoying it. Been working on some personal projects.
Right.
And getting some stuff done around the house. It's been wonderful.
You want to tell the audience about your new project? Was it the Google Earth?
Yes.
How does it go again? The Google Earth?
Virtual tours.
Virtual tours, yeah.
I've done a couple of these under the banner of Peregrinatio.
Peregrinatio.
Like pilgrimage.
Nice.
And so, maybe we can link them on the podcast. So
yes.
I got a link to the podcast in the descriptions. But yeah.
We stopped doing show notes a long time ago.
But maybe we could embed the link.
But we can do that.
In the
Absolutely.
the description, right.
So tell us about it.
Yeah, so Google, have you ever messed around with Google?
Oh yeah, quite a bit.
It's so much fun.
It is fun.
It's phenomenal. So you can do these virtual tours where you can organize place marks and kind of fly through different places. Mm-hmm. And so my hope is to, over the coming years, is do a number of these kind of archaeological tours of places, mainly in the Greco-Roman world. And so I've done a couple of them. I've done Dodona.
So yep. What does it involve, really? Are you narrating?
Yes.
While using your droll, witty commentary?
Something like that.
While we fly through the different parts of the site?
Right. So these are things you can do manually. So you can kind of click through them. But what I've done is I go to the archaeological site. You kind of look at, what are the key the key sites in the landscape,
right? And
then for each place mark, I try to have a few photographs, a short description of kind of why this site is important, and then and so it's something that someone who's interested could go through manually on their own, just kind of click through. But then I've also videoed them using kind of screen capture software, and do a kind of a fly through, a walkthrough, and where I kind of narrate and take the audience kind of through a tour of a particular site.
It sounds fascinating. Is there any scratch and sniff involved?
There's not. I don't. The tech hasn't gotten that good yet.
So when we're going through Eleusis, we can't really find out what it smelled like at the time.
Smell the incense burning.
That's right
there. Or the no, not yet.
Okay.
But I've done a couple. I've done a tour through Dodona, the Oracle of Zeus, and then also
we were there together. Remember?
We were. It's one of my favorite spots.
2011.
Yes. Yep. And another place we've been to together, Epidaurus.
Oh, yes.
The healing sanctuary of Asclepius.
That's right.
So I just finished that one yesterday. So, let's put it on the website.
Absolutely.
And people can check it out. Right?
That sounds like an excellent project.
Yeah. So, I'm hoping that these two are two of many that I'll do down the line. But it's a lot of work.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I'm sure.
Yeah.
Yep. Well, that's great. So what are we up to today?
We are finishing up book 10 of the Aeneid. Right. And it's bloody.
Okay.
And it gets gory. It was kind of one dead body after another in the second half here.
It's a toll. It takes a toll.
It does. It's very Iliadic, but we're gonna do our best to get to the end of book 10 today.
That's correct.
Yep. And
I think you have the opening quote. Is that right, Jeff?
I do. No shout out today?
No shout out.
No shout out.
We think people are listening. The numbers actually, I think you and I are probably the only ones concerned about this. Maybe the sponsors are, but the numbers have gone through the roof in the last couple of weeks. They've done really well.
I looked at it yesterday. It's very impressive. So thanks to everybody.
We're very grateful for all you who are listening.
Yes, I do have the opening quote here. This comes from an article by one Tim Stover from the journal Phoenix, 2011, and his article is entitled "Aeneas and Lausus Killing the Double and Civil War in Aeneid 10.
Killing the double.
Yes.
Okay.
So I'm not sure what to make of this. I'm very curious to hear what you think of this when we get to it.
So I think it's going to be Aeneas and Lausus. Lausus is Aeneas's double?
Yes.
Okay.
And Aeneas kills him. Lausus is presented as a young and mostly innocent young man, and Aeneas kills him. and it's tragic for everyone involved.
Mm-hmm. Do you remember those old gum commercials?
Which ones?
The Double Mint gum.
Oh yeah.
Where they had lots of twins, right? And
That's
they'd
right.
have these twins strolling around chewing gum.
Yeah, I remember that.
It was pretty persuasive.
It was, exactly.
Sure.
Like if those twins can enjoy it, maybe I can.
Maybe
too.
I can by myself, right? But Aeneas and Lausus, they'd be chewing some Double Mint. That's the idea.
Exactly. Maybe have a chew before Aeneas turns and kills him.
Right.
Something like
They
that.
stroll around the plains of Lazio.
Right.
So this is 2011. Tim Stover
Yes.
from Phoenix, right?
Yes, and he writes, after Aeneas has mortally wounded Lausus. So this is one of the many deaths. This comes towards the end of book 10, where Lausus is a young man who kind of steps between Aeneas and Lausus' father Mezentius.
Right.
And ends up getting killed for his trouble. So after Aeneas has mortally wounded Lausus, the Trojan warrior empathizes with the young Etruscan, largely because he sees much of himself in his opponent. This is from starting with lines 821. I'll give you the translation that Stover gives. But when the son of Anchises, Aeneas, saw the features and face of the dying youth, a face wondrously pale, he groaned heavily in pity and held out his right hand, and the picture of his own loyalty to his father came to mind. What, poor boy, can Aeneas, the true, give you in return for these fine deeds of yours? What can he give you worthy of so great a nature?
So that's the translation of Harrison, the note tells us.
Yes, Harrison, yes. Within the article. Right.
The translator always has to get some credit here. Now, maybe that's a self-interested argument,
but it's important.
Okay.
Yeah. And then Stover, the pietas displayed by Lausus, who had intervened in an attempt to save his father Mezentius, clearly affects Aeneas, who is reminded of his own pious love for his father Anchises. As Lausus dies, Aeneas realizes that he and the young man have something in common, that is, pietas, and this moves Aeneas deeply. Aeneas has, in fact, killed his doppelganger.
I love that word.
Isn't that a great word?
It is.
Those Germans, they have a word for everything.
They can do some things really well. He killed his doppelganger.
Yes, his double. However, critics have largely failed to recognize the manner in which Virgil employs etymological wordplay to reinforce the sameness of Aeneas and Lausus. This article seeks to elucidate the etymological dimensions of the Aeneas-Lausus episode and to connect Virgil's etymologizing here to some of the broader themes of the epic.
Okay.
So I'm not all that interested in Stover's kind of his ultimate argument.
Right.
But I really what I liked in the quote is calling attention to this doubling.
Yeah.
And it's odd. So this comes after a long series of where Aeneas is kind of killing everything in his path and without any kind of sympathy or compassion for anyone.
Right. He's just mowing them down.
He's mowing them down. And he, as we'll see, he's even kind of gathering up young men for a human sacrifice.
Yeah.
And then Lausus, this episode seems to kind of break that spell momentarily. Okay. And it's where the action kind of comes grinding to a halt. And it's very strange. So what does Aeneas exactly see here? What is he doing?
So just to set the stage, make sure we all have the details straight. Aeneas is fighting against Mezentius.
Yes.
And Mezentius has a son named Lausus.
Yes.
And right as Aeneas is about to kill Mezentius, the father, the son Lausus intervenes between them.
Yes.
And makes a plea, right?
He does. Yep.
And then Aeneas kills him, but then he has this remorse, kind of, because he
instant regret.
Yes.
Yep.
Recognizes himself in Lausus. I like the way Harrison translated pious, because here we have in line 826, quid pius Aeneas, pious Aeneas. He says, Aeneas the true.
The true.
Is how he describes
you like
himself.
That?
I do.
Yeah.
For the sake of variety. It's a good way to translate pious.
Right.
But to the main point, I think it's obvious that Virgil is emphasizing this familial or this filial piety, right? And I think it's really almost a trope in literature that when the hero dispatches the villain, the hero does so somewhat reluctantly because he sees himself in that character, kind of a there but for the grace of God go I. I had all these gifts. He has all these gifts. At some point in my life, I turned down, the left fork in the road.
Yeah.
The villain turned down the right fork in the road. But if I had made a slightly different choice, I think this is how the trope works.
Yeah.
I could have been on the receiving end, of the justice that I am myself meting out.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, definitely. I think that's I agree with that wholeheartedly.
Okay.
Yeah, I was trying to think of this, of course, in relationship to the Iliad. How is Homer being played here? And so, with Achilles,
Yeah.
there I think of two significant moments where he is reminded of his father Peleus, and
Right.
one is when Phoenix comes to see him in the embassy.
Correct.
Right?
Book 9.
Book 9, and then second, and perhaps more importantly, is when he gives Hector's body back.
Yes.
And he sees Priam.
22?
22, I believe. Yeah.
Maybe a little later than that.
But I thought it was interesting that, so I definitely Virgil obviously is using that trope here.
Right.
It's when Achilles sees his own father in Priam that his humanity returns.
Right.
I just thought it was striking that for Aeneas it happens on the battlefield. It
Yes.
happens in someone that he kills. Where with Achilles, that I don't see him recovering kind of his humanity while he's being a warrior.
No.
And that's I don't know why that's important, but I just find it really striking.
Mm-hmm. I have a couple thoughts. We'll see how valuable they are. It's not book 22. Book 22 is the death of Hector. 24 is the scene in the tent and the ransom of Hector's body.
That's right.
So
right.
I was wrong about that in the first go around. I think the difference is Aeneas is a hero of civilization, right? He is establishing the Roman people, Romanum condere gentem. Mm-hmm. That's his brief. That's his task. So in some ways, it makes sense that it happens on the battlefield because he can never be completely surrendered to war in a way that Achilles can. Achilles is a force of nature, destructive in every way. And I think that the basic message of the Iliad is that nature beats nurture, right? Achilles is by nature the great man, and Agamemnon is by custom the usurper, right?
Yeah.
Law has put him in charge, but he doesn't deserve it.
Right.
So Achilles has to restore balance by showing that, no, the naturally better individual triumphs.
Yeah.
And that's himself, although it leads to his death. Aeneas is doing something very different. He's not trying to defend his honor, per se. He's trying to protect all those who are traveling with him and give his son a kingdom and a future.
Yeah.
So I think in that sense, it makes good sense to put this exchange on the battlefield to show that Aeneas is never completely surrendered to bloodlust.
Okay. Yeah. No, that's very well argued. I mean, there is also, of course, this other layer of fate that's involved. This has such a more of a heavy hand in the Aeneid than in the Iliad at all, right? And so, as I was reading this morning, the second half of Book 10, as Aeneas is going out and just kind of slaughtering everything in his path, I kept thinking, well, how am I supposed to be interpreting this? Is this Aeneas giving into a bloodlust? Is this a kind of that the meanness of Achilles that we see, right?
Or are you supposed to have sympathy for him
as a puppet of fate,
right?
And because there's Jupiter breaks in and Juno pleads with Jupiter, let me just save Turnus from this,
right?
And he says, Turnus is his numbers up. You can maybe take him away for a little while, but what's going to happen is going to happen,
right?
And so is that the lens we're also supposed to see Aeneas's actions in the battlefield, that he has no choice,
right,
but to become kind of this temporary madman?
Oh, I think that's true.
Okay,
he has to engage in Achilles-like behavior for a good portion of these latter books in order to achieve his end.
Yeah.
But it doesn't overwhelm him completely. And maybe that's what this Lausus episode shows us.
Yeah.
I think we can't talk about this without reference to the end of Book 12 and the death of Turnus.
Yeah.
And this is what, bedevils critics so much.
Yes.
Does he in the end actually give in to bloodlust?
Right.
Where's the sparing? Where's the mercy that's supposed to be part of his hallmark as Pius Aeneas?
Exactly. And if just even the end of this book where he ends with the death of Mezentius,
right?
There is no compassion.
Right.
There's no word. And Mezentius again doesn't beg for his life, but he says, bury me with my son.
Right.
Aeneas says nothing and just puts the sword in his throat.
Right.
Which reminds me a lot of kind of how the epic ends.
That's correct.
And so the Lausus episode, in some ways, it's not mirrored in how the epic ends. In fact, it's quite the opposite. And so that raises all kinds of other questions. Is the epic unfinished? Yes. Or is it saying something a little bit more sinister about this whole notion of fate and the founding of Rome?
So you're not veering to the revisionist interpretation necessarily, that this is a subtle criticism of the Augustan regime and the Pax Augusta?
And I've been convinced by you enough that I've stepped back from that.
Skeptical
ledge.
at least.
Because I'm persuaded by the argument that no ancient Roman would have seen it in that kind of ways.
Doesn't seem likely.
And I think you're right. And so that's a very presentist, almost in some ways Judeo-Christian way of looking at it, right?
Yes.
But that's not a fair critique of Virgil.
Or almost post-Enlightenment, right? Because democracy as the best form of government is a rather recent development.
Right.
Not the fact of democracy, but the view of it. Right?
Yes.
That there's a kind of basic equality and everyone gets a vote, and any other kind of system of government is inherently totalitarian is a recent idea.
Right.
And so I'm not sure that the ancient Romans felt the same way about the Pax Augusta as we do now at this time.
Yeah.
But still, there has to be a more moderate interpretation along the lines of, even though Virgil thinks that the outcome is good, the Roman peace, he's not happy with all of the means for getting there.
Exactly.
And that's some of what we're seeing.
Right. I think, Virgil, one of the things I like about Virgil, he's very honest about the cost of all of this. Right. But that's a very different thing than saying that he's subtly saying that the Roman Empire is a bad idea.
Yeah, that the cost is not worth it.
Exactly. Right. I think we're getting ahead of things.
Oh, sure. We're already at the end of book 12.
You know what? As I was reading this too, as I wonder, how much do we want to not talk about the end of the epic?
Yeah.
But you really can't.
It's impossible.
It's impossible. So much, especially in book 10, I think you have to interpret in light of kind of the epic end. So it's too late for a spoiler alert. But
No, everybody knows. Right, Turnus dies, and it's largely unexplained.
Yes.
Here at the end of book 12. Yes. But in book 10, we have some more ground to cover.
We do. We do need to back up.
All right. So we're starting out about line 360, right? So this is 3/8 of the way through. This is a long book.
Yeah.
And Pallas sees his fellow Arcadians panic and run from the Rutulians.
Yes.
Right. So Pallas is the son of Evander. Set the scene a little bit.
Right. So Aeneas has just returned from Arcadia.
Yep.
And he's
bringing back allies.
Lots of allies, lots of Etruscan allies and Arcadians, and Pallas, the son of Evander, is with him, and Pallas is itching to kind of prove himself on the battlefield.
That's right.
Yes.
It's interesting to me how Pallas fits in the dynamic with Aeneas and Ascanius. Ascanius is a little bit eclipsed here.
He disappears.
Yes, by Pallas. Ascanius has his debut as a battle warrior and so forth, and it's more than the Trojan game where he was riding around in the little Shriner's car.
Right, exactly.
In book 5.
Right, and last time we saw him, he was in the shampoo commercial.
That's correct. All's hair and love and war.
Yeah, you got it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But now he's not really crucial to the plot. Instead, he's replaced by Pallas, by this kind of fill-in, who seems to be older in the story than Ascanius. I think of Ascanius as 13, 14, maybe.
Still too young to take his place by his father's side on the field.
To really contribute. He's not as old as Telemachus.
Right.
In the Odyssey. Telemachus is 18-ish.
Yes.
Right? And so Pallas seems like he's more around the age of 16 or 17, just right in that spot where kind of stuck a little bit between boy and man, figuring things out.
Yep.
But nevertheless, he gets a lot of screen time.
He does, right? And I think last episode, I think we were talking about, so why does Pallas play this role? And we were talking about how I think it was important for Virgil to have this role played by a local Italian.
Yes.
And then you were also talking about Pallas, in addition to that, he's a surrogate son.
Yes.
Aeneas, and so he plays a role that Ascanius really can't for what Virgil is trying to say and accomplish.
Right.
Right.
Well, one of the other interpretations for those who see a sexual interpretation or a sexual element in virtually every relationship. Yeah. Right. And I'm not one of those persons. Yeah. But on the theory that the relationship between Achilles and Patroclus is not merely platonic, this has been suggested for Aeneas and Pallas as well.
Really? What? That would be a whirlwind romance because they haven't known each other that long.
I don't find that persuasive.
I don't
because
either.
Virgil doesn't talk about it.
No.
But I suppose it's worth being aware that is one of the interpretations.
Yeah. Okay. So Pallas sees his fellow Arcadians. They panic in the face of this onslaught of the enemy. And he gives a great rallying speech and kind of shames them back into the order. And he says, honor demands that we go where the battle line is the thickest. Follow me. We're not fighting gods here.
Right.
What are we going to do? Run off to Troy?
Right.
Are you men or are you mice?
Right.
And that's what kind of fires them up and turns them around.
Yeah, that was so inspiring, Jeff. I have to pause here for a second. I want to rush into war here.
Yeah. So Pallas goes first. He goes headlong into that, and he has a kind of a mini Aristae of his own. He kills lots of named warriors on the other side. I even found some of these lines as having a kind of dark humor. Maybe it speaks to my own kind of twisted sense of humor.
No, I think there's definitely an element of the macabre here. You want to read a little bit of the Lombardo?
Right. So this is in the midst of Pallas's killing spree. And Virgil says, and you too, Laertes and Thymber, twin sons of Daucus, fell on the Rutulian plain. As boys, you were indistinguishable from each other. A sweet perplexity to your parents. And you've got twins,
yes,
messing with people.
It's doublemint once again.
Exactly. So, but Pallas made you easy to tell apart, lopping off your head, Thymber, with Evander's sword, while your severed hand longed for you, Laertes, its dying fingers shifting their grip on your sword.
Yeah.
So it's easy to tell that Thymber's the one without the head.
Yes. And Laertes is the one whose severed hand is gripping the sword, and the fingers are still moving.
Still twitching.
Yeah, now, I challenge anyone to tell me, to convince me that this is less evocative and compelling than some Hollywood CGI.
Oh, I'm right there with you.
I mean, this is so disturbing because now I have that image lodged in my mind, but it's an image of my own creation because I know what a hand is. I know what a sword is. I don't think I've ever seen an actual severed hand, thankfully, but some people have, you know, doctors and soldiers and people in accidents. But I can put the image together in my head, and now it's stuck in a way that seeing, endless cinematographic slaughter leaves almost no impression.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you. Right. Once kind of the director and the cinematographer had decided this is what it looks like.
Right.
Well, then you've robbed, the infinite images that an individual reader could bring to the scene. Right. Yeah, it is gruesome.
It's gruesome, and Virgil's great at it. And it reminds me also of there's an episode in Herodotus. I didn't check, but I think it's the naval battle of Salamis. I think that's where it is. And he's talking about the hand-to-hand combat between the Persians and the Greeks, when their ships came into close proximity. And there's one particular fellow who, it's a Greek, he grabs part of the prow of the Persian ship and he gets his hand severed with an axe. And the hand's still gripping there onto
really?
Yes.
Yeah.
So even in prose, right, you can bring in some of the gruesome and the grotesque for memorable reasons.
Yeah. It's great, gory stuff. So the battle goes on. It goes back and forth. The Arcadians are up, then the Rutulians are up, but it's coming down to a duel.
So it's a little bit like a soccer game.
Yeah.
You might say.
Yeah.
It's long and involved. There's lots of action. It's fast-paced, but the outcome remains unclear.
Right.
Pretty much till near the end.
Some people...
I tried to say that without any kind of...
Right. Some people say, was it a soccer game, lots of action? Well...
Okay. They call it the beautiful game.
They do, yeah.
Right? And my understanding is that if you understand it, which I don't, the feats of athleticism and the intricacy of the coordination is incredible.
Yeah.
But still, you don't really know what's happening till the very end.
Right. No, yes. So, no, I kind of got it. Did you watch any of the World Cup this past December?
Do you want to lose half the audience?
No, I'm just curious.
No, I didn't.
Okay.
Right. It's not because... What is it not because? I didn't.
Okay. Yeah.
Did you?
I'm not a huge soccer fan, but I watched it and I actually enjoyed it a lot. I thought it was fascinating. But it requires a patience.
Right.
Yeah.
I just brought it up as similar to this battle.
Sorry.
One side is up, the other side is up.
Okay.
There's lots of really vigorous activity.
Yeah.
But there's really no clear outcome until you get right near the end.
Yeah, like a lacrosse match.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah.
All right. But it comes down to this duel between Turnus and Pallas.
Okay.
And so
this is Hector. This is Hector destroying Patroclus.
Patroclus, exactly.
On accident.
Yes, exactly. How about a little Latin here?
I'd love to do that. So this is line 439, lines 439 and following. And it goes something like this. Interea soror alma monet sucedere lauso, turnum qui valocri curdru meri secat agmen, ut vidit soci os tempus de sistera pugnae, solus agin palanta furor so li mihi pallas, debe tur cooper drip separen spectator ad esset.
Nicely done.
Thank you.
And Lombardo translates thusly. Turnus had a sister, the nymph Juturna, who warned him now to bring aid to Lausus. The hero split the ranks with his swift chariot and called to his men, "Stand down from battle. Pallas is mine and mine alone. I only wish his father could watch."
Oh.
Wants him to die before Evander.
It's chilling.
Yeah, it is very chilling.
Yeah, so what is the Homeric description of war? in wartime, fathers bury their sons.
Yeah.
Right. Instead of vice versa. That's
Right.
that's what makes it unnatural.
Ah, yeah.
And so this is a subtle allusion or reference to that idea. If you make the father watch the son's death, it's all the worse.
It's all the worst. Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Right. It's a great duel scene. You want to read a bit of the scene from Lombardo's translation?
Yes, let's do that.
Okay.
So this is Lombardo. This was how Turnus charged. When Pallas thought he was within spear range, he began his own charge, hoping to balance this mismatch in strength with daring and luck, and he prayed to bright heaven. I beseech you, Hercules, by the welcome you received in my father's house, come to me now and help me in my need. Let Turnus see me strip the bloody armor from his dying limbs, victorious over him as his eyes close in death. Hercules heard the boy's prayer and stifled a heavy groan, shedding useless tears. Jupiter addressed his son with fatherly words. Each has his own day, brief is the time and irretrievable the life of every man. Yet, to lengthen fame by deeds is the task of valor. Under Troy's high walls fell many sons of gods, my Sarpedon among them. Fate calls Turnus too, and he has reached the end of his allotted years.
Now, I thought this was really interesting. We talked about that connection between Hercules and the Arcadians, right? He had been hosted there. Mm-hmm. And so that's apparently why Pallas prays to Hercules.
Correct.
But Hercules immediately knows that Pallas can't be helped.
Right.
He doesn't even respond. But I thought it was interesting that Jupiter's response was, hey, fate, governs us all. But what he doesn't say is that, sorry, Pallas's time is up. He says Turnus's time is up.
Right.
So I don't know if that's just a little bit of misdirection on Virgil's part, because I'm surely his audience would have known the story.
Oh yes.
Right. So this isn't like, oh, we're expecting Turnus to die, but oh no, it's Pallas instead.
Right.
But I thought it was just really striking that Jupiter answers Hercules to basically saying, yes, Pallas is going to die, but he says no, Turnus is going to die soon too.
Yeah. So he starts. I think that's astute. He starts with these platitudes. What did you think of these platitudes? Each has his own day. Brief is the time and irretrievable the life of every man.
It sounds like a bad pop song.
Is it supposed to comfort Hercules? Those kinds of statements on the part of Jupiter, because there's a really quick scene shift, right? We have Pallas praying to Hercules, and then Virgil zooms us up to Olympus and shows us Hercules' interaction with Jupiter. Mm-hmm. And I guess Hercules can't answer the prayer because he already knows what's going on with fate. Right. And then Jupiter comforts him.
I guess so. I mean, I think the fact that he mentions Sarpedon is supposed to remind us of Iliad 18.
Yes.
Where, I think we talked about this in an earlier episode, but when Zeus steps aside and allows fate to take Sarpedon, he weeps and his tears fall like blood on the plain of Troy. Right. It's almost like Zeus said, hey, listen, I've gone through this.
Right. We all lost somebody.
Hercules. Right? So Hercules is the one weeping now. Right. And Zeus is kind of saying, well, I went through this too. Right. You just got to deal with it.
You got to deal with it.
Yeah.
I think the mention of Turnus, it could possibly serve this purpose. He's saying, don't think that Turnus's murder of Pallas, which is unavoidable, will go unavenged.
So that he's trying to make Hercules feel better by mentioning Turnus.
By mentioning Turnus. He's trying to make him feel like, okay, I know it seems really bad that the young kid that just prayed to you, Pallas, everybody's favorite, he's going to be murdered. But don't worry, fate calls Turnus too, and he's at the end of his rope. He's going to get some comeuppance.
Gotcha. Yeah.
But that could only be satisfying and comforting to gods like this. I don't think this would be satisfying to real people, right? Or to gods that were, righteous and fair. Right. This seems quite unsatisfying.
Yeah, exactly. Right.
I don't know.
I don't know why this just popped into my head, but it reminds me of like traditions at West Point, where the freshmen, they have to be seriously hazed by the upperclassmen, right? And they are comforted by the fact that, well, don't feel it's bad now, but when you get older, you get to do this to other people. You'll be
the hazer,
right? Exactly. And I always said that I don't want to do that either, right?
That's very good. That's a very good analogy. The thing that popped into my mind was that these persons whose family members are murdered or otherwise mistreated, and the crimes go unsolved for a very long time, right? Sometimes when the perpetrator is finally brought to justice, the family members have a real sense of satisfaction, even though the one they lost can never be brought back.
Right.
But they feel a sense of satisfaction that the perpetrator, the criminal, has finally faced justice.
Yeah.
And I've never been in that position, thankfully. But I think those who are too quick to dismiss that as bloodlust or immoral, I think they're not really human.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
They're not really human if they say things like that.
Yeah.
Of course you'd be satisfied.
Yeah.
And so maybe...
It taps into that,
right,
that
to,
element.
to speak to the other side, maybe this is how Jupiter is comforting Hercules.
Yes.
Some sense of justice.
Yeah. Agreed. So Turnus, he in the battle, he kills Pallas. And here, again, Turnus is playing the Hector role.
Right.
And so, again, with comparison with the Iliad, Turnus, in some ways, he's acting a bit more civilized than Aeneas does. He says that I will give the body back to Evander. So, despite what Turnus just said, I wish I could kill him in front of his father. Once the deed is done, he says, I will return the body to Evander for burial. But he says the Arcadians you're going to pay for teaming up with Aeneas.
And do you think this is more misdirection? Virgil, okay, 1 minute Turnus is Hector. The next minute he's an Achilles because he's returning the body, but he's more gracious.
Yeah. I don't know what to make of it. I think that if you play that kind of that 1-to-1 game, you just drive yourself crazy.
I think that's right.
If you just say, well, in this book, Aeneas is Achilles,
right,
and full stop. Turnus is Hector, full stop. It doesn't really work out that way.
No, it doesn't.
And I think that also kind of it robs Virgil of some of his genius.
That's a brilliant point.
Yeah,
he can reference characters. He can create his own characters from Homeric types.
Right.
They don't have to match up.
Exactly. Right. So, but then we have the business of the sword belt.
The Baldric.
The Baldric.
Yes.
Right. And this is what Turnus strips off Pallas's body for a trophy. And it's something that he virtually calls attention to it, saying that this is here, Turnus in many ways is pounding the nail into his own coffin by doing this.
I think it's Balteus, I think is the word.
Is that the Latin from which Baldric surely must come?
I think so, but please don't call me Shirley. Yeah, it's the embroidered, it's got beads on it and other things, a little spot for your cell phone maybe.
Yeah, exactly. Right. For your chapstick.
Right, your rappel if you had to go down, side of a building.
Exactly.
All that stuff
It's your Swiss Army Baldric.
That's correct.
Right.
You're going to read a little bit of the
because I think it's important not just that he's stripping a trophy off of Pallas, but what's on the belt. This I think this will also become interesting to talk about once we get to book 12. But Lombardo translates, Turnus spoke, embracing his left foot on Pallas's corpse. He tore away the massive belt, engraved with crime. I think the Latin there is actually nefas. So it's not just a crime. It's like the most an unspeakable trespass, right?
Right.
And this is the crime. The sons of Aegyptus murdered by Danaus' daughters on their nuptial night. The rooms reeking with blood. The work of Clonus, son of Eurytus, who chased it in gold. Turnus now exulted in this belt and gloried in its possession. Now, here's one of those things I get. Like with Homer, I give Virgil the benefit of the doubt. He doesn't throw things in there for the sake of throwing them in there.
No.
Why does he call attention to tell us what myth is on the Baldric? And it's this famous story where Aegyptus, he's marrying off his 50 daughters to 50 bridegrooms. They don't want to do it. And 49 of the 50 on the nuptial night kill the brides. And then they are doomed to the underworld of trying to fill this leaky cauldron that will never be filled. Why this story? And do you have any kind of immediate thoughts on that?
First reason.
Yes.
It's an implement of war, right? The belt is an implement of war.
Yep.
So you're not going to put on your belt, scenes of poppies and daisies and rainbows and people drinking coffee.
Although on Achilles' shield, you had people, farming and dancing.
Yes, but you also had a picture of the city at war and the city at peace.
Okay.
I think that's a good counterpoint.
Yes.
But I'm gonna maintain the value of my argument by saying the shield of Achilles is other than all other kinds. It stands alone. It's sui generis of all the different kinds of battle implements.
Okay.
Now you may not grant me that, but that's what I'm going to cling to.
Okay.
So that's the first point. You have to have something intimidating. This is why apotropaic, right? You got to have something like the head of Medusa, one of the Gorgons, on your shield.
Yes.
Right?
That's right. It's why you don't name a football team the Daisies.
That's correct.
Okay, right. All right.
Right. This is why when people name their cars or, Western gunslingers, they name their guns. They don't give them nice names.
Right.
They're supposed to be threatening.
Right.
That's the first reason.
Okay. So in your second reason?
I don't have one.
Okay. So now that's interesting. I mean, that's the kind of I think that's the practical, on the ground, realist answer. So I'm much more interested, though, of course, in a narrative answer.
I know you are, but I didn't have one for you.
Okay.
And I was just going on and on about those examples just to stall for time.
Well, could there?
What do you think,
well,
Dr. Winkle?
I'm not exactly sure. I'm thinking that the business of Aeneas kind of interrupting the would-be marriage of Turnus. Are we supposed to be reminded of kind of a wedding gone wrong?
Oh yes,
is that there?
Yes. I don't think that you're seeing things that aren't there.
Okay.
I think you're seeing something that is there.
Okay.
This is the scene of a wedding gone wrong, and that is precisely what Aeneas as Paris now, right? He's acting like Paris. He's stealing someone else's bride.
Yes.
He's stealing Lavinia away from Turnus,
right?
Who had done everything correct,
right? And so in this it's a foreshadowing of Turnus's own death. He becomes one of the would-be bridegrooms that's murdered before he can get married, or
I guess.
Okay.
I guess.
So
the other thing is, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, please.
Well, it just seems like the way that the translation reads here, Turnus now exalted in this belt and gloried in its possession. He has too much attachment to this thing. This is a little bit unnatural. He's glorying in it too much. The bloodlust and the prize. So
it's hubris.
Yes, you're supposed to take some trophy from the one you've slain, and this happens, all the time in the Iliad. It's constant, right?
Yeah.
But you take his Rolex, right? Or I don't know if he's got a nice pair of shoes. You take his Air Jordans or something like that. But you don't take the sword belt from around his waist. It's kind of it's too intimate, and he rips it off. And it
makes me think of like a big time wrestler holding up the belt.
Yes,
as you're entering the ring, you're
that's
kind of
right.
saying, "Look how great I am."
Right.
It's not just so it's you're saying like that would be a trophy you wouldn't take.
It seems to me, and I don't have any hard evidence for this, but it seems like it's going too far.
Okay.
It's kind of like what Nisus and Euryalus were doing on the night of their carnage.
Right.
Take some stuff.
Yeah.
You have a heroic exploit. You deserve some kind of reward.
Yeah.
But don't overdo it.
Don't overdo it. And then if you do it, don't exalt it and kind of twirl it over your head.
Right. You're just asking for Nemesis to swoop down and crush you.
Right. Now, just to foreshadowing, when we get to the end of the epic, I remember having a discussion in graduate school. We were reading the end of Book 12, and it's when Aeneas sees the belt of Pallas.
That's right.
That's where he kind of snaps.
That's right.
And
it's the catalyst.
The traditional answer to why does that make him snap is he's reminded of Pallas and his attachment to Pallas, and that kind of that revenge takes over and he kills Turnus.
Right.
But I remember having this discussion where somebody in the seminar said, well, could it be it's not just that he sees this belt and he remembers it belongs to Pallas, that he sees this scene, and it's that scene, it's the myth that kind of drives him over the edge, as well as its connection to Pallas. And that's why Virgil kind of plants that seed here in Book 10. And the careful reader or the careful listener will remember, okay, what exactly is he seeing at the end? And could that have some kind of direct response on the character of Aeneas? Beyond that, it's just, that's Pallas. I'm reminded of his death, and now I've got to take revenge.
Right.
So I don't know the answer to that.
Yeah,
I just think I thought that I don't remember where the discussion went, but I thought that's really interesting.
Speaking of really interesting, it's time for the ads.
Let's do it. This episode of Ad Nauseam is brought to you by Ratio Coffee. Ratio Coffee, man, I love my Ratio 8.
Yes?
Yes.
Tell me more.
I'm jumping right into it. This morning, I ground my beans. I bought fairly recently one of the metal cones.
Nice.
It rests.
It's great, isn't it?
It's wonderful.
It's better than the paper ones.
Way better.
Some purists will say it's a different flavor, but I don't think so.
I disagree. No. But it sits nicely right in the top of my hand-blown glass carafe. It's so simple. I hit the button.
Right. You bloom.
I bloomed. I brewed, and it was ready.
And you were ready.
Yep. And I brought up a cup up to my wife on the second floor.
Nice.
And
did you let her drink it, or did you just bring it up there?
I wafted it in front of her nose and snatched it away.
Took it back down and dumped it in the sink.
Exactly right. Yeah.
You cad.
But Yes, and it's all possible because of these wonderful machines that Ratio makes. So you have an opinion on Ratio, Dave?
Oh, yes, I do.
Okay.
It's a very good one.
Yeah.
My machine is almost 4 years on now.
And still running like a dream?
It's spinning like a top.
All right.
Yep. I mean, no machine is going to be entirely free from signs of wear and tear.
Yeah.
But most people just, kind of at a glance, they'd never know it wasn't just directly out of the box.
Yeah.
And the function is perfect. It hasn't changed at all in function.
Yeah.
Really good.
Yep.
So I got a little limerick here.
Oh, you do?
Yeah, and let's play a little game here, and let's see what happens. So this one is about coffee, and it goes like this. In the early morning I wake, and the world is still half awake. I need a strong brew to start my day anew. Coffee, my love, give me a break. Did I write this? What do you think?
I really hope you didn't write it.
Tell me why.
Because it's awful.
In what ways? I agree with you, but in what ways?
It's simplistic.
Okay.
It's trite. The rhymes are obvious.
For example, in the early morning I wake.
Yes.
And the world is still
half
awake.
Rhyming wake with awake is...
That's lame. That's something Madonna would do.
Exactly.
I think.
Right.
And what about the rhythm? I need a strong brew. To start my day is a wrong number of syllables. One is 5, one is 6. And what about the end?
The last line makes me want to punch it in the face if I had one.
Coffee, my love.
Give me
a break?
I don't. Yeah,
so who do you think wrote this?
Well, I think I know who wrote it.
Because it's written on there.
Yeah, you want to reveal to the audience?
Yeah, it's Chat GPT.
So this is the best our AI can come up with?
This is the AI. And I thought, I really need some material for the ad read.
Yeah.
I'll go to Chat GPT, generative pre-trained transformer, and I'll see if they can write a limerick. So I put in, write a limerick about coffee.
Yeah.
And I was disappointed in the results, let me say.
Right. And as am I. I'm kind of sad that we had to go through that. But
Sorry.
But
we're going to do it again in a minute.
But the other side of the coin of this terrible limerick is the great stuff that Ratio.
You want to go back to the product?
I do want to go back to the product.
Before we go back to the product,
yes.
I'm not out of a job yet.
Okay.
Right, because my limericks aren't great, but I can beat this, so I'm okay for now.
You're okay for now,
all right.
Exactly.
So let's tell the listeners about the coupon code.
Right. So if you go to ratiocoffee.com, and if you want to pick up one of these machines, the Ratio 8 or the Ratio 6, you can type in the coupon code ANCO9Y.
And the Y stands for Yankovic.
Yes, of course it does.
Like Weird Al.
Right.
ANCO9Y.
And that will get you 15% off your entire order.
Check it out. This episode of Ad Nauseam is also brought to you by Hackett Publishing. Hackett is now in its 51st
or 50th
or even 52nd
year, I believe.
Second year of business. They have offices in Cambridge, Ma, and Indianapolis Inn, and they have been purveyors of fine books from the classics and many different eras of human learning for a long time now, and they are sponsoring this program for which we are very grateful. Jeff, what do you like about Hackett?
I love that their books are affordable.
Yep.
Every translation that I've used from Hackett for my own pleasure reading to what I've used in the class has been great. I've never had a student complain about it.
Really?
And I actually teaching the Odyssey right now in my myth class, and I had a student come up to me and saying, you dropped this big thick book on us, and I was dreading it. He says, but I am currently 5 books ahead of the class because I can't stop reading.
No, that's incredible.
Right. And so she loves it. And she was saying, I love Homer, but part of that, she loves Lombardo's translation.
It's so important when you're introduced to a new author who didn't write in your mother tongue to have a good translation so that you can like it.
Yes.
It's incredible. You also like the covers, I think.
I do. I love the covers.
Covered that a little bit.
They're so clever. They're so inventive.
Right.
It's great. It's great stuff. Now, we don't have another limerick.
Yeah, we do.
Okay, what is it?
Well, here it goes, and we won't reveal who is the I'm putting in scare quotes composer.
Yeah.
There once was a lover of books who read them in all sorts of nooks, from the library to bed, with a book for his head. He devoured them like tasty cooks. Did I write this?
I would refuse to believe that you could come up with such tripe.
Okay. Right. So what is it exactly about it that you don't like?
It's just who read them in all sorts of nooks.
Yeah, that sounds very unpleasant.
Very unpleasant. It's just kind of finding little odd corners.
Right. And is a library a nook? And is a bed a nook? I don't think so.
No. And then he devoured them like tasty cooks. Like, who's being eaten?
Exactly.
Right?
That's the first thing I thought.
Yeah.
With a book for his head. So he's putting his head on the book, and then he's devouring them like tasty cooks devour books, or he's devouring them like he devours tasty cooks.
Right. And even with a book for his head, you could think of it in terms like he has a book in place
for a head
of his head.
Yes,
right?
you're right.
So
it's not really well done, is it?
This is ChatGPT again.
This is ChatGPT for the win. I went to the website because they use websites for this kind of thing now, Jeff.
Really? Is it all on the interwebs?
It's all on the internet.
Yeah.
Yep. And I entered this phrase: "Write a limerick about books."
This is what it spit back.
The subtext was: "Save me from doing the work myself for our ad read." And this is what it spit back.
Wow, man.
So I think we're still safe.
Right. I think we are still safe, right? I was worried a little bit about AI taking over, like in the Terminator.
Can they podcast? For example.
Right.
Probably.
So I'm feeling actually a lot better about it now. If this is what they can come up with.
This is the best they can do.
Right.
But the best Hackett can do is to bring you really fine translations at an affordable price.
Indeed.
Jeff, can you read the coupon code?
Yes. If you go to hackettpublishing.com, use this coupon code AN 2023.
Right.
Yeah. So AN plus the current year.
Yes. HACKETT. Hackett has 2 T's. Publishing.com. AN 2023. What do they get, Jeff?
They get 20% off their entire order and free shipping.
Wow. Check it out. Okay, Jeff, as we get back into it now,
yes,
we're going to look at the rage of Aeneas.
Yes, he goes full on Achilles.
Berserk.
He goes berserker mode. Yep. And he's raging through the lines. He's killing everything in his path. Even like Achilles, he rounds up some young men for a human sacrifice. I mean, it is gruesome. So I think like even you.
What do you mean, even me?
Well, how we sometimes we will disagree on kind of how we're supposed to kind of view the violence.
I see.
Right, but I think like even you would say like the gathering up of the young men for a human sacrifice, both by Achilles and Aeneas, we're not supposed to see that. Oh, well, that's what warriors do, and this is part of his.
No, this is beyond the pale.
It's beyond the pale. Okay,
right.
I just wanted to make sure we were on the same page.
Yeah, you could say what have I done? I even grew some on the gruesome.
Nice.
Thanks.
And so, and the scenes are, it's not just Aeneas killing people, it's the way he responds to those who even begged for their lives.
Right.
And so I wanted to call attention to one scene where...
couldn't he spare some people?
Right, exactly. So he encounters one Magus.
Okay.
And here, I'll just pick up Lombardo's translation. Magus falls at Aeneas' knees and begs for mercy, and Aeneas shows none. Then he, Magus, fell in supplication at Aeneas' knees. By your father's ghost... and by your hopes for growing Euless, spare my life for my own son and father. Buried deep inside my high house lie talents of chased silver, masses of gold, wrought and unwrought. Troy's victory does not turn on me. One's life won't matter. All right. So he's so having already talked about the Lausus episode,
right.
Why is Magus bringing up the fact that he's a father and he has a son and mentions Euless? Why does that not?
I'll tell you why.
Soften his heart.
He's not sincere about it.
And you think he's lying about the gold and the silver?
No, I think he's lying about that. I think he's honest about that. He's honest about the gold and silver, but what he really wants to do is he wants to buy Aeneas off.
Okay.
Right? Buried deep inside my high house, like talents of chased silver, masses of gold, wrought and unwrought. He wants to buy him off, and I think maybe this is what turns Aeneas' stomach.
Okay.
If it were a pure pity appeal, maybe it'd be more moving.
Okay.
But if it's mixed in with a kind of bribe,
that's what kind of sullies it.
I would think so.
What about the
self-preservation?
Isn't the physical act of kind of dropping and grabbing Aeneas' knees? Like even in Homer, you have that phrase like "by your knees."
Oh, right.
Isn't that you've kind of thrown away all of your teammate? You've thrown away your honor, but at the very least, the gods seem to suggest that you should spare the life. So
yes. Yeah. Two very famous supplication scenes we should maybe talk about. The one is in the Iliad, of course, when it's book 1, Thetis goes to supplicate Zeus on behalf of Achilles, right?
Right.
She kneels at his feet. She does two things. She grabs him by the knees, and she puts her hand on his cheek.
That's right. That's right.
So putting the hand on the cheek is a gesture of real intimacy, right? How long have we been friends?
Man,
15, 20 years?
20 years, yeah.
I don't think I've ever put my hand on your cheek.
Yeah,
nor vice versa.
No, and I hope that doesn't happen anytime
I hope
soon.
not.
Right.
Let's not do that. It's too intimate, right? It's real close, and so Thetis does that. The other supplication scene I'm thinking of is in Euripides' Hecuba, where Hecuba, is about to have herself and her daughters slaughtered by Odysseus, and she holds on to his beard, touches his face while gripping his knees, and so that's a suppliant's gesture. And you're right, you've let go of all teammate. There's no more honor. You're at the end of the rope. but there's supposed to be a kind of mercy shown in that extreme vulnerability.
Exactly.
Right?
No, there might be a different. I mean, the two examples you chose involved women, right? So I don't know if there's a difference.
I'm trying to think of a male example.
Well, I have one from the Odyssey. That we can that this reminds me of. But I wonder if if supplication acts differently if it's a male versus a female.
I've never thought about it. I'm sure there's a German dissertation on this.
Sure there is too.
350, brilliant, close-packed pages.
Yeah.
Well, there is the suppliant scene in Iliad 24 we've already referenced with Priam and Achilles. And he does something like this. He grips the knees and...
Yeah,
it's intimate.
Right.
I can't think of another... You had one in mind here.
I have one in mind. Well, let's see how Aeneas responds here.
You want to keep it in? Okay.
Yeah, I want to refer to it in just a moment. Another corollary. You've seen The Godfather?
Yes.
Right. So
yes.
You come in, you kiss the ring.
Oh yes.
Right. And so that's kind of an act of supplication.
Right.
Recognizing kind of who's in charge here. Mm-hmm. But let me get to how Aeneas responds. So picking up with Lombardo's translation, he spoke and Aeneas answered him, "You can save all that silver and gold for your sons. Turnus did away with such traffic and war when he took Pallas' life. This is the judgment of my father's spirit, of great Anchises, and of Iulus my son." With these words, he grasped Magus' helmet with his left hand, and bending back the suppliant's neck, buried the sword up to its hilt. Aye. Thus ends Magus. Right. And so this reminded me of I think a scene that I don't think has gotten a lot of attention in the Odyssey is where the slaughter of the suitors is beginning. And Leodes is introduced just beforehand, and we learn that he's the soothsayer of the suitors. So
he says sooth, huh?
He does say sooth. And so he's not really one of the suitors, but he hangs out with them.
Right.
And Homer tells us he was the one guy hanging out there who disapproved of how the suitors did things.
So he's really on the fringes.
He's on the fringes, right? And I think Homer goes out of his way to raise a little sympathy for him, right? At worst, guilt by association.
And he was probably on the fringes of the shroud business too.
Of the what? I'm sorry.
The shroud, that Penelope was weaving.
Oh, exactly right. Way off to the side.
That was supposed to be a pun.
What?
The fringes of the shroud.
Oh, I missed it.
Never mind.
A fabric pun.
Yeah, it's kind of a fabric pun. Okay, it's just a pun about fabric.
Can we move on?
Okay.
All right. And so, and then a few pages later, the slaughter's beginning. Odysseus finds Leodes, and Leodes says, grasps his knees.
Right.
He says, "Listen, I never wanted to marry Penelope. I always disapproved. Please spare my life.
Right. I just happened to be here. I'm an innocent bystander."
Right. And Odysseus says something like, "How?" He goes, "If you really were their soothsayer, how you should have seen this coming," which is not a bad point.
It's not a bad point.
But he also says, "How many nights must have you dreamt about taking Penelope, and you'd be the one she ran off with," which, as we've learned, that wasn't true at all. And he cuts off Leodes' head as he's still speaking. So how are we supposed to interpret that? And in that phrase that by your
we've already
needs,
covered the Odyssey, though.
I know,
right?
we
It's
have
like 400 episodes ago.
Right.
No, that's a great question.
Yeah,
it's a great question.
And
so, do you think that Odysseus was being cruel there?
I do. Okay. I think that
he should have spared Leodes.
Yes, I think he should have.
So you think there is such a thing as an innocent bystander?
Absolutely, of course.
Well, let's say that there's a person who's being robbed at gunpoint in his car, and there are 4 out-of-town tourists standing opposite this guy, and they're filming the whole scene.
Yes.
Not running to help the guy while he's being robbed.
Okay.
That could be a crime, right? In some small towns in Vermont or Maine or something like that.
Not stepping in
right.
as a crime.
You're not getting the reference. This is Seinfeld, man.
Oh, that was like the final episode. I'm trying to forget the final episode.
Are you really?
It's horrible. Right.
You don't like anything, do you?
No, I love Seinfeld, but not the way it ended.
Okay. Right? You don't like Starship. You don't like the final episode.
Starship. Well, okay, we can't go down that path.
Right.
All right. So, like I said, Leodes is guilty.
Yes.
But he
had lots of opportunity to interrupt the suitors, to seek justice. He let it go, and now. He wants to be spared.
He loses his head for that. I maybe that's a presentist argument, but I think Homer does want us to see an Odysseus who's kind of given over to the same rage that we see with Aeneas here. It's kind of the slaughter's begun, and he's not discriminating. He is shooting first, and he's asking questions later, or not even asking questions. He's just shooting first, and so I think this is kind of part and parcel of. Virgil wants to see an Aeneas here who is doing unseemly kinds of things, and then that, like we discussed, what's going on? Is he just a puppet of fate? Is he making a choice here? Is this an indictment of his character, or is he just being kind of strung along by the gods? I mean, all of that I think are layers to kind of interpretation here.
I don't think it's number 3. I don't think it's an indictment of character.
Okay.
As for 1, 2, and 4, I'm not sure.
Okay.
The one that seems most likely is that he's being strung along by fate, in the sense that this was required for founding Rome. So although it's not completely consistent with his character to be so filled with rage and bloodlust, he has to do it in order to achieve his end.
Would you say the same thing with Odysseus then killing Laertes? It's
no, it seems
a
different.
Casualty of war.
No, it seems different.
Okay.
For Odysseus, everything is personal.
True.
In a way that it isn't for Aeneas.
Right. I
mean, what stands out is that the palace episode is personal.
Yeah.
But most of this killing is, pro forma, right?
Right. Or he even mentions here he kills Magas because you're basically dying because Pallas was killed.
Right.
And I'm just kind of gathering you all up in that same in that same basket. Yeah.
Here's an analogy. Maybe I'll be brief, but in the Tolkien movies, right? The Lord of the Rings movies, all those endless orcs that are being slaughtered.
Yeah.
Right. Yes, the great staged battle scenes where all these people are doing stuff. There's something impressive about the scale, but the actual fighting is boring, right? Because these are not persons with any story. They're just so subhuman. They're so monstrous that it's not really there's really no interest in that.
They're all Ensign Johnson from the Star Trek Enterprise.
Exactly.
They're there to be dispatched.
Correct.
Yes.
So Virgil is a much better artist, obviously.
Yeah.
So he invests the different characters with some background, but Aeneas still has to kill them.
Right. And so he gives a little bit of meaning here.
Correct.
He raises the pathos. So
That's right.
We get to meet Magus.
Right.
Right.
Before he dies.
Yeah.
Yeah. Can I read some more Latin here?
Yeah, please.
Okay. So this is lines 557 and following. Istinc nunc metuende iaque non taptem mater, conde tu mi patrio quanarabit membra sepulcro, a litibus linque referis aut gurgita mersum, unde feret piscesquim pasti vulnera lambent.
Very nice.
Thank you. Can you read some of the Lombardo?
Right. So this is later. Aeneas is still kind of in the midst of his killing spree. He's just killed a man by the name of Tarquinius.
Okay.
And this is what he says to the dead body.
Right.
He says, "Lie there, you hulk. Your sweet mother will never heap earth above you back home in your country. No, you will be left here for the vultures, or thrown into the sea, rolled by waves, and hungry fish will nibble at your wounds."
Well, that's awful.
Isn't that awful, right?
That last line is very, very disturbing.
But it reminds me of what Achilles, at least initially, threatens to do with Hector's body. He says, the dogs are gonna take it apart, and then that's when he changes his mind, decides to drag it around the city instead.
Yes, but the gods preserved it, so it didn't have any corruption or decay.
Right, but it reminds me here is you're not even going to get to a burial.
Right.
And so, connect this with, Turnus killing Pallas. It's brutal, it's gory, but he says, I'll give the body back.
Right.
I recognize kind of there are rules of war, but here Aeneas is kind of throwing all of that out.
So he's more civilized than Aeneas?
I think at this moment he is.
Huh.
Right.
Does that have any implications for the rest of the epic that you want to talk about?
Well, I think this will all kind of come to a head in Book 12.
Okay.
And so, how do we ultimately see the character of Turnus? Is he more noble than Aeneas in the way that most people see Hector as being a more noble figure, a more civilized figure than Achilles is? Right?
Setting the bar high for book
12.
For book 12.
Yes,
right.
Indeed.
Okay, and now we have another scene shift.
Yes.
Now we head back up to Olympus.
Right.
We see what the gods are up to, and what are they up to?
Well, Jupiter, I don't know what he's doing. He turns to Juno and to his wife, and he says, you know what? Venus is really responsible for all the Trojan success right here. It has nothing to do with Trojan valor or bravery. It's Venus kind of doing her thing, which is, by whatever in the epic, is not true.
Okay. Is he trying to placate?
I think he's needling
Juno?
her. I think he's kind of like poking her and kind of saying, look at what Venus is getting away with. That's how I read it.
I thought it was more along the lines, I could well be wrong, that your Greeks are not getting dissed, right? The Trojans aren't really succeeding. It's not that Trojans are so great. Venus is really doing it, so don't feel so bad.
So that's a much more charitable reading.
It could be both.
Okay, yeah.
And he has different ends in mind.
Well, if he means to placate Juno, it doesn't work. She's very upset, and so
can anything placate Juno?
Right. She complains, and she says, well, at least let me save Turnus, take him away from the battlefield. And Jupiter says, okay, you can do that for the time being, but fate's gonna fate.
Right.
And so Juno, she comes down. I guess she's like Venus. She's like Aphrodite with Aeneas in the Iliad, right?
Right.
She comes down. She disguises herself as Aeneas and gets Turnus to chase her. and goes down to a ship, and Turnus hops on the ship thinking, oh, I've got him now.
Trapped him on board ship. Right. It's going to be like a scene from Pirates of the Caribbean.
Exactly. Captain Jack Sparrow.
Right.
And then Juno cuts the cable and steers the ship down the coast back to Turnus' hometown to get him out of the battle. And Turnus, it doesn't make him happy. I mean, he panics. He said, should I swim for it?
Right. As the shore recedes into the distance where all of his friends and allies are, being trounced by the Trojans.
And he even considers suicide. So I'm going to be the guy that abandoned my men at the apex of the battle.
Pretty noble, pretty heroic.
It is very heroic.
But cheated by the gods.
Yeah. So she takes him back home and again, maybe gives him a brief respite before his number is up. Right. And this too, also, as I was reading all of this, didn't Jupiter just in book 9 say, hey, no more messing around, no more interfering?
Yes.
It's again, Jupiter's kind of strangely impotent in all of
Yeah,
this.
I guess. I don't know. Maybe what he meant was you can't actually engage in battle. You can't go onto the battlefield like they did in the Iliad. You can't line up and fight on the plain.
And actually kind of...
But you can do tricks and feints and deception.
So she found a loophole.
She found a loophole.
Okay.
I don't know. I'm not very convinced by that.
Right.
I think that your main point is probably strong, that this seems contradictory to what you previously said.
Yeah. And then the book closes out with this scene with Mezentius and Lausus that we talked about at the top of the episode.
That's right. So Jupiter turns the tide of battle, right, to the Rutulian side. And Mezentius is the Etruscan king.
Right.
Allied to Turnus.
Right.
And so Aeneas has to take him out at some point because he's posing a pretty serious threat to Trojan victory.
Right. And so he has kind of a mini little Aristeia of his own.
Do we want to talk about the concept of Aristeia for a minute? Not everyone has listened to all 113 episodes.
Right. True. It's kind of a moment. It's a spotlight moment.
Okay.
Where the poet kind of reveals what you can do on the battlefield, and your skill is unmatched in this short moment where you're kind of killing everybody in your path.
Okay. So if you go watch a jazz band play, right? There are a lot of songs or a rock band where they're playing together, right? They are a connected whole, and that's where the beauty of the music, where they're playing off each other. But then there's the extended drum solo, right?
Right. That's
where the guy, the gal, this is what I've been practicing for 25 years.
Right.
You're going to see all of it in a 6 minute
drum solo.
Yes. Right? A 6 minute segment, or the bass solo, right? That's kind of like an Aristeia.
It is.
Would you say?
Yeah, that's great.
Spotlight focuses and.
Yep.
And, the crowd loves it, but if you weren't there, maybe I'm wrong, if you weren't there to experience it, it would be less pleasing, maybe.
Yeah.
It's part of the setting, because you got to have the whole group activity. That has to be established.
Yes.
And what they can do in unison or in harmony before the solo is valuable.
You need that context, right? So
right.
Every concert I've been to where there's been a drum solo, that's always been my cue to go to the bathroom.
Really? You check out at the drum solo?
It's ridiculous. A bass solo too.
You don't like the bass solos?
Stop. Just stop.
Really?
Yeah, exactly.
What about the piano solo or the guitar?
Those are more lead instruments.
You can stand that,
Yes,
huh?
I can.
Wow.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Or
unless it's prejudiced.
Unless it's a jazz band, right? Then that makes more sense in the terms of a trio.
Okay.
But like a rock drum solo, please.
No.
Oh, it's horrible, right?
This is why I have no taste. Yeah. I'm in the lobby until the drum solo.
Oh, really?
Then I rush
in?
I rush in.
Yes.
I don't want to miss any of this.
But my complaint aside, the analogy is apt.
Okay.
I like
it's
that
apt.
a lot. It is.
Good.
It's very,
So Iliad Book 6, Diomedes has his big Aristeia. In fact, the book is named after him, the Diomedeia.
Yes.
Right? The time for Diomedes to shine. Mm-hmm. Okay.
And it culminates in him wounding Aphrodite.
That's right, on the wrist. We talked about last time. Right. So this is Mezentius's.
Right.
Aristeia, but it's not very long-lived.
It's not very long. So it ultimately comes down to between Mezentius and Aeneas. Mezentius throws a spear at Aeneas. He actually misses and kills somebody else. Then Aeneas throws a spear and wounds Mezentius, not mortally, gets him in the groin.
Oh.
Yeah, exactly. And then he draws his sword and walks forward to finish the job. And this is when Mezentius' son Lausus steps in the middle.
Right.
And that's where we get the scene that we talked about at the top of the episode. We have some time for a little bit of Latin here.
Yeah, I have to read at least line 789.
Okay.
We don't have to do all of it, but 789 is so moving. Ingemuit cari grabater genitoris amore. He groaned heavily, right, with the love of a dear son.
Yes.
Utui dit lausus lacrimae, quae per ora volutai, hic mortis durai casum tua quaptima facta, Si qua fidem tan testa perilatura vetustas, non equidem nec te uinis memoranda silebo.
Very nice.
Thank you. And what does our man Lombardo say?
Before I read, I just wanted to kind of note is that, Turnus's kind of his wish that Pallas would die in front of his father.
Right.
It kind of comes true here, but with other people.
Right.
He, or at least a father dying in front of his son. We get so it's kind of some mixed foreshadowing there.
Right.
But the translation, so Lausus watching, groaned deeply for love of his father, and tears rolled down his face. And then Virgil breaks in. He says, neither your death nor your heroic deeds, if antiquity can confer belief in prowess so great, nor you yourself, noble young man, so worthy of memory, will I leave in silence. And so even the poet kind of steps back to recognize that something very moving and important has happened here. And again, I don't fully understand it. We've only just met Lausus, and so why is this man so worthy?
Right.
But he's setting up the scene for Lausus's own death and Aeneas's response.
Do we want to get the dying words of Mezentius? The last little exchange between Aeneas and Mezentius?
Yeah, I think
it's very gripping.
It is gripping. Maybe we can end with that.
Yeah, I really like this taunting of Aeneas.
Yeah.
Can you read some of that, please?
Sure. Right. So Mezentius, remember, he's wounded, but he gets himself a horse, and now he's going after Aeneas, screaming out Aeneas's name. He wants revenge for the death of his son. And then we'll pick it up with Lombardo's translation. Aeneas, he kills the horse with a spear. The great stallion reared, pawing the air. He threw his rider, and then falling himself, hit the ground head first, disjointing his shoulder and entangling Mezentius. The Trojans and Latins lit up the sky with their cries. Aeneas ran up, drew his sword, and standing over him cried, "You're not so tough now, are you, Mezentius?" So he's pinned under his dead horse.
Right.
The Tuscan lifted his eyes, drank in the bright air, and when he had recovered his senses, answered, "Bitter enemy, why do you taunt me and threaten me with death? Killing me is no sin. I did not come into battle for a truce. My Lausus did not seal such a pact between me and you. I only ask one thing. If the vanquished have any claim to clemency, let my body be covered by earth. I know my people's hatred surrounds me. Guard me from their rage. Let me join my son in the tomb." And I think what's striking here is Aeneas doesn't respond with words.
No.
It says, Mezentius said these things and did not flinch when the sword entered his throat and his life sluiced out in streams of blood. And that's how the book ends.
That's it.
Yeah.
Wow.
And so I think that scene has a lot more in common with how the epic ends.
That's right.
Than the business with Lausus.
It's pungent.
Right. And so we'll have to revisit that notion if Lausus is a doppelganger of Aeneas, and what does it mean that Aeneas then kills himself?
Yeah.
Right. Is that just a hooey?
Yeah. Well, I don't know. It's another type of self-sacrifice.
Yeah.
Aeneas is willing to do anything for the founding of Rome.
True.
Even let go of his general humanitas.
Yeah.
And kindness and become a killing machine.
Right.
It's necessary for Rome.
Right. But we got to get out of here.
We got to wrap it up.
Yeah.
No doubt.
Before we go, tell us a little bit about the Moss method or LLPSI or both.
Yeah. So the Moss method for Greek is a program that I've established. It takes you from neophyte
to erudite.
That's correct. I like to describe it as self-paced, expert, and accessible. So it is a program based on the work of Charles Melville Moss, Learn to Read Greek, the Greek Reader. And it's 40 lessons in each module. Lessons 1 and 2 are completely finished. Modules 1 and 2 are completely finished. 3 is in process. It's got 40 video lessons, 40 assignments, 6 quizzes, 2 exams, vocabulary list, lots of help. There's no reason not to succeed in Greek in this program. And like I've said before, there may be on the whole, better instruction somewhere. It would be immodest to say mine is the best, but in terms of value, I think this is an exceptional value. What you get for your money in terms of expertise, I think it's really unrivaled. And they get the office hours, which you are so fond of.
I love the office hours, right? So they can interact with you
That's
directly.
Right.
No flunky.
No flunky, no flanky. Every Friday morning, currently 10 a.m. Eastern, we get together on the Zooms and we talk Greek. And anyone who's in the course can join us. Go to mossmethod.com. Check it out.
Excellent.
Also have a Latin program, latinperdiem.com/LLPSI. That's Lingua Latina per se illustrata. You can study Latin with me. It's a similar kind of setting, but this includes real live action participants. So you get to watch while I'm teaching other students Latin from the ground up using Orberg's famous book. It takes a little bit of the pressure off to watch other people learn. You can take notes, rewatch the videos, and interact with me in weekly office hours.
Sounds great. And they can find that, where should they go?
latinperdiem.com/LLPSI. LLPSI.
Fantastic. All right.
So we got some people to thank, don't we, Jeff?
Yes, we do. As always, first thanks goes to Mishka, our engineer, the one who puts it all together.
Yep, makes it sound great.
Yeah, makes it sound great. Makes us sound better than we actually are. And then there's those guys, Scott Van Zen and Ken Tamplin.
The screaming guitar and the intro and outro music, so generous to share with us their talent. Ken runs a vocal academy, how to sing better than anyone else. It's a modest claim. And then Scott Van Zen, right? If you want to take guitar lessons with him, you can do your own. You can have your own Aristea, do your own solo, a lead instrument. Jeff would stick around for that one.
Absolutely.
That's right.
Definitely. Hey, if you want to get a shout out, if you have an idea for an episode, you want to ask a question, you can write to us. You can write to Dave at adnauseam.com. Don't forget the V.
Or Jeff at adnauseam.com. Do not forget the V in the word ad nauseam.
Right. You can also go to adnauseam.com and pick up a t-shirt.
Yeah, check out our Lurch with Merch.
That's right.
Section of the website and get a Quai Nocent Docent t-shirt with the Erasmian tag. Pathemata, the things that hurt.
They teach.
Yes. Right.
And so what are we doing next week, Dave?
Well, we teased the audience with Tarzan and Tradition, which was going to be, I think, an excellent episode, or probably 2 episodes, on how the character of Tarzan by Edgar Rice Burroughs, how that interfaces with the classical literature. Not sure it's going to be on for next week. We'll just have to see, but it's definitely in the works.
Yes.
And this is based on a book by a former professor of mine, the late Erling Holtzmark. I'm really excited to do that material, but we're not sure when it's going to be.
When we do it, we want to do it well.
We want to do it well. So we don't want to rush it.
We can keep the audience in suspense for next week, or
a couple weeks.
Yeah. Right. There we go. All right.
Okay.
And Dave, you have our gustatory parting shot.
Yeah, I do. This one is by a guy named Michael Pollan, a famous name, a work called The Omnivore's Dilemma.
I have it on my shelf.
Do you?
I do.
I was going to ask. A Natural History of 4 Meals. Have you read it?
I've read parts of it.
And?
Yeah, it's all right. It's
a ringing endorsement.
Well, it was given to me by a family member who's a vegetarian.
Oh.
It was kind of a trying to nudge.
Did you get nudged?
I did not.
Okay,
no, but
is the book covered in bacon drippings or something?
It was fine. What I liked, I read. But let's get his quote here.
Okay, the book came out in 2007. I thought this was a really interesting quote. I don't know what to think of it at all, but half the dogs in America will receive Christmas presents this year. Yet few of us ever pause, good pun, few of us ever pause to consider the life of the pig, an animal easily as intelligent as a dog that becomes the Christmas ham. A number of things about this, I'm just curious. How does he know that only half the dogs receive Christmas presents? And what about the other half? What do they do?
Yeah, right. Where is he getting these stats from?
Exactly.
Right, yeah.
Is there some clearinghouse of dog stats?
I have no idea.
The second thing I want to know is, how does he know that the pig is as intelligent as a dog? And that it's easily so. I mean, has he compared the SAT exams of the respective animals?
That's one of those things that I've heard that it's kind of like accepted wisdom that's never really challenged.
I
the
agree.
pig is a very intelligent animal.
I've talked about this too. I was raised on a hog farm, and I
Right.
spent a lot of time with pigs, and on the whole, they are easily as intelligent as a dog.
Okay.
But does Pollan know this?
I don't know.
And I guess the final thing is, what does he want us to make of this? Does he want us to give pigs Christmas presents, or does he want us to eat dogs?
He wants us to stop eating pigs. Is what he wants. Yes. Right.
So the dogs get a Christmas present,
Right.
and they're smart.
And the pigs
pigs get eaten. They're easily as intelligent as a pig, but we eat them.
Right. Why are we eating them?
Okay.
Right.
Would he be happy then if we ate dogs and gave the pigs Christmas
I
presents?
don't think so at all.
No.
I don't think he's going there at all.
Am I just being perverse?
I think before you get too riled up, we need to stop.
Okay. Thanks for listening.
Thanks.